I'll do it now.
I don't have a clue how to do that.
I'll work on it right now. Give me one sec.
Where everybody
Guys,
is.
we are live on
Oh, we are
Facebook.
live on Facebook. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and then Lawrence, you're on.
Okay, I can't see anybody anyway. I don't know who's there. Can I just see you? So,
Okay, Lawrence, go ahead and unmute yourself.
yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. Beginning of October 2nd. And the usual message, the first one is, the slaughterhouse of failure is not in my destiny. I will persist until I succeed. Og Mandino. We have to keep our eye on that thing at all times. So today we're going to be talking about a book it's called Peak, by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole. And Dan thought about making this into a 2 or 3 week program, because it's got a lot of subjects that we touch on constantly through other books that we read. And we forget to put into practice a lot of the things that we should be doing. And this is a kind of an up-to-date reminder of many things. So Dan, if you want to start with.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I first want to just say welcome, everybody. And we're going to kind of change the format a little bit this week. Since we haven't been leaving a lot of time for questions, we're going to do about 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if you guys have questions, we'll take them at the end, and we can engage in some discussion. But so basically this book, Peak, is about mastering skills and how you go about mastering skills. And the basic tenet of the book, and this is all done through research, is that the right sort of practice carried out over a sufficient period of time leads to improvement. Nothing else does. And this kind of goes back to the Carol Dweck talk that the book we talked about, mindset, and that it's all about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And the difference between the two is that one, you think you can't get any better, and the other, you think that you can practice, or you can learn, or you can to excel at different things. And so that's the basic tenet, is that you practice. There aren't any real talents, there aren't prodigies. It's all about practice, and what we do and how we practice that's going to make us successful and experts in what we're doing. So anyone can improve. It just takes time. And the only shortcut to doing that is practicing things the right way. So there's a right way to practice, and there's a wrong way to practice. That's what the gist of the book is that we can practice, but there's effective ways to practice these things.
Yeah. So actually, as opposed to if you're in a hole, stop digging. In other words, you can practice and you can do something, but you've got to be constantly tweaking and introspecting and analyzing and seeing and getting feedback on what you're doing. Because you could practice and you think you're doing the right thing and you're doing great, but unless you've got some feedback, unless you've got somebody to mentor you or to give you some feedback on how you can improve, the practice has to be intentional. It has to be very, very, very in the zone. We have to be with absolute involvement in what we're doing, because otherwise we're just mindlessly practicing, and that's not really going to make us improve.
Right. There's, one of the things they talk about is that there's 2 types of practice: naive practice and purposeful practice. Naive practice is just basically a waste of time. You're just going through the motions. You're just doing it because because you're supposed to do it, and you're doing it the same way every time, and you're not really paying attention and evaluating what you're doing and trying to get better at it. Purposeful practice is well defined. There's specific goals, and without a goal, there's really no way to judge whether the practice is even being successful or increasing your success level or your mastery of a particular thing. And then, some components of purposeful practice are that you put a bunch of baby steps together to hit a long-term goal by having a plan, right? And you start at A and you end at F, and there's steps along the way, but you can reevaluate those steps. And if you go through A to F and it's not working, you reevaluate and you change the steps to hit that goal. So it's all about practice and reevaluating, and then the second component is feedback. You have to know whether you're doing something right, and if not, what mistakes you're making, right? And then you have to get outside your comfort zone. Feeling uncomfortable is a very important part of being successful. If you never push beyond your comfort zone, you're not going to improve. And then you need a way to monitor your progress. And then also, finally, maintaining motivation. And so all of those are different components of purposeful practice, and that's some very important steps to follow to kind of master an expertise or get better at what you're doing. And so what we're doing in this business, we have all ways to do all of those things, and what works for Lawrence may not work for me. So we can teach people the basic components of what we're doing, but we all have different personalities. We all have different ways of talking to people. And so those kind of things are going to vary. Those are the variables. But there's some constants, like we have the scanner, and we spent $100 million to develop it, and measures carotenoids. And why is that important? Those are the constants, right? That we need, the messaging that we need to get across. But how we go about doing that is going to vary by person, and what works for me isn't going to work necessarily going to work for somebody else.
And just doing something over and over again, unless we're out of the comfort zone and we continually strive forward, we continually strive to be better, to do something better, to be a better scanner operator, to be a better listener, to be a better communicator. Otherwise, just repeating stuff keeps us in a zone of mediocrity. It's just over and over, and we just stay in a state of mediocrity. We've got to strive. We've got to come out of the comfort zone. We've got to really try and see what limits we can get to. In other words, and that is the other thing, is not only our own, but to be able to impart those with others. So if we've got, if we're talking to somebody who is a scanner operator, and he or she is quite happy doing, 10 scans a day, but they've got 50 patients a day, it's also a way to try and help them strive to achieve better results with a bigger number of patients or customers. So I'm just saying that it's a constant tweak of where we are and how we can become better and what we need to do. And one of the best ways to do that is also to have some introspection and retrospection and a mentor, and not be afraid of somebody saying, this could have been a hell of a lot better if you'd done this or you've done that. So it's a question of purposeful practice.
Right. And, we have a system in place. We're just teaching others that system.
Yep. But
then you need to look at the system and how it's working for you. And you can have different people, the other members of your team helping you evaluate and giving you feedback, getting on three-way calls with you, telling you what you could do different, or giving you suggestions on what you can do differently, how you can change what you're doing. So you're not going to improve much without giving the tasks your full attention, but you're also, without feedback, either from yourself or from an outside observer, you can't figure out what you need to improve on and how close you are to actually achieving your goals, right? And so this is all about achieving your goals. When we talk about what we're doing in our business, we all have goals of what we want to do. We want to make X amount of money. We want to, reach a certain pin title. We want to, place X amount of scanners and have those scanners be useful and being used effectively. But you need to be evaluating the things that you're doing, from, the conversations that you're having with prospects, conversations you're having with your team, conversations you're having with physicians, and conversations that you're having with consumers that you're trying to put on product. You know, these are all different skills that we need to develop, and they can be developed individually, but we also need feedback on what you're doing, especially when you're first getting started in this business. You know, I got a ton of feedback from Lawrence and Michael and Stephen Moore, and you know, they helped me with calls when I first got started. And so that's where we're looking to others for their expertise, right? They've done this a longer time than I have. So I have something that I can learn from them. And hopefully, you know, I have some, you know, there's things that I can bring to the table. Lawrence talks about it all the time. We talk about it on our team calls. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, right? And we just need to learn how to use those effectively within our team. So, you know, going back to the not being able to improve much without giving the task your full time, you can do this part-time, or you can do this full-time, but you can't do it sometime. And that's a quote from Lawrence. So, you know, and I think that's very, very important to understand about this business. If you're doing it sometimes you're probably not going to be that successful. You need to be working this business, you know, at least a part of every day or every couple of days, you know, whatever schedule you decide, but you can't do it sometime.
Yeah, and actually what you're saying, you know, if you're a runner, for example, it's always good to have somebody to pace with you, because that person will push you. You know, you think you're doing pretty well. I mean, I walk around my neighborhood here, and I think I'm doing pretty well. And sometimes I time myself and I think I've done great. And I've walked around, you know, in 45 minutes. And yet I have done it in 35 minutes. So unless there's somebody there to say, well, come on, let's push it along a little bit. Come on, lengthen your stride, do it a bit better, move it a bit. And, you know, to be able to push us, then that's how we can actually get better. But we also need to have the discipline and the routine to be able to continually do something and strive to get better in a mindful way, and I always say, you know, there's a saying that wherever you are, be there. So if you're going to do something, put your entire one-track mind into that one thing and don't get distracted. Do it with absolute intensity, be in the zone. And by doing that, then afterwards introspect and say, what happened? Did I do this well, or did I do it? What can I improve? And then maybe have a mentor. And the mentor, if you don't actually physically have one, there are many, many things that we keep telling people to, you know, we should be doing, like reading, you know, Napoleon Hill and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins. These are also mentors, people that we can refer to, that we can learn from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that we can learn from. You know, we have peers in this business. We have, like Lawrence mentioned, there's lots of books, there's lots of videos online. You know, I spend a little bit of time every day. You know, I make that part of my schedule. You know, I have a pretty defined schedule for the day and what I want to get done. You know, and if you're not focusing, you know, with laser focus in this business, the more laser focused you are in this business, the more success you're going to have. But, you know, you also need, you know, if you go through a lull where you're, you know, let's say you go a couple of weeks or a month and you don't have any good prospects, you know, then you need to focus on what you're doing differently, or pivot. You know, we talked about pivoting last week, you know, and that's where the pivot comes into play. You know, you need to look at what you're doing, and if that's not working at the time, and right now is a very difficult time because there's so many things changing and there's so many outside influences that I think, you know, people are unsure of whether they're going to be able to get a job in 6 months. They're unsure about, you know, are we going to get locked down again? You know, what's happening in the political arena, you know, all these different things that they have that they're thinking about. And so, you know, you kind of need to pivot and think about what's going on in the moment in society, and whether or not there's something that you can do to change what you're doing to be more successful. Or you can pivot to your scanners that you have placed that maybe aren't being as productive as you like. You know, you can start to focus on those and make them peak, you know, get them to be more productive so that you're more successful through what you've already done, through the work that you've already done, the hard work, the time and effort that you've put in. And so, one of the things I've talked about in the past is my passion for cycling. And, those guys, if the Tour de France just ended, it's a 2,200-mile race in 21 days. These guys are, they're cycling 100 miles a day or more. And, that takes laser focus, right? It takes training, it takes diet, it takes all of these different things. They need to get massages every day. They need to do all of these things to reach their peak. And they're laser focused on that. They're laser focused on winning the Tour de France. There's tons of races throughout the year, but they're all focused on the Tour de France because that's the big race of the year, right? And so all the training that they do for the year is all leading up to the Tour de France. And so they're laser focused on that, and they have their goals and they have their training. And if their goal is to peak at the right time for the Tour de France, so that they're at their maximum performance for that. And cycling is a team sport, but it's also an individual sport. And that's basically what we're doing. I mean, we have that environment here. It's an individual business, but it's also a team business. And without both of those, I don't think that you can be really, really successful or maximize your success.
Well, our own Tour de France, we have a Tour de France actually all the time. We've got, our WIGs, our wildly important goals. And so that's our Tour de France. And if we focus on our own Tour de France, the big thing about all this is to maintain motivation. We've got to put our minds right. We've got to be in our minds. We've got to be absolutely clear and not vacillate, and also impart that with our teams. So basically we're doing the 3 F's. We're focusing, we get feedback, and then we fix it. And this is something we've got to try and do almost every day. We go and do something, we look back and say, well, what did I do today? Like we always joke about, would I employ myself? Would I employ me? And that is, where we say, well, that's the feedback. Did I do well enough? What did I do well? What did I do wrong? Then that's where your team comes in and say, hey guys, so how do we do this week? How do we do this month? How can we help with this? How can we better that? So there's several factors that come into this, like motivation. That's the big thing is we've got to keep our own, we've got to be on major fuel to be able to make sure that we achieve our goals.
Yeah, a lot of those things are like planting seeds, right? I planted a garden this summer for the first time in a long time, and I was thinking yesterday about that. You plant seeds. And you need to nurture those seeds. You have to have the right soil, the right pH. You have to water them regularly, and I kind of equated that to what we're doing. We're planting seeds with people that we're talking to about this business, whether it be physicians or medical device sales reps or whoever it may be. But if we don't nurture those seeds, if we don't drip out information to them about what we have and what we have as a team, they're going to die on the vine, right? So if we're not planting them correctly, if we're not feeding them the nutrients that they need, the water that they need to grow, we're not going to be successful. Because if our team's not successful, we're not successful.
And on this thing about seeds, something's just occurred to me. We may be planting banana seed. Well, we may be planting seeds of not exactly banana seeds, but you may be planting a seed of one variety or one flower or one fruit or something, but they all require something different fertilizer, different amount of water. So this is where we've got to understand who we're talking to as well. So we plant the seed, but we've also got to maintain in our minds, what is that seed? Is it going to be an avocado seed, or is it going to be a chrysanthemum? So even there, we've got to focus on who who that seed is, or what is that seed we've planted, and what we're trying to get from that, and what will come, and what they need, and how we can motivate the best growth in that particular seed. So I just see it's about almost 10:02. Dan, I don't know if you've got anything you want to go, or if you want to open it to questions, or do you think?
Yeah, I just one final comment from the book, and that's, we only learn until we feel like we've hit a good enough point. As soon as you feel like you're good enough, subconsciously or consciously, we stop improving, even with continued repetition. So we need to constantly, be growing, never feel like we've hit a plateau, constantly be striving to be better than we are today. I think that's what we should all be striving for.
Oh, I forgot. You're totally right. When we think we're satisfied, and then we stay in that plateau, that's when we become mediocre. And that's where we've got to get out of. We've got to keep on getting better than just, in the comfort zone of mediocrity. Even though we may be successful, it's still just a comfort zone of mediocrity unless we keep on doing something. So if anybody has any questions or anything like that, we got a few minutes. We had a request last week for a little time to answer any questions. If anybody would like to, please unmute yourselves and go ahead. Are they unmuting? I can't see anybody anyway.
Lawrence,
Yes,
it's
sir.
Martin. Would you be kind enough to repeat the author of the book Peak?
Sure.
Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole.
Thank you.
It's basically they're the gentlemen that have done all the research on this particular topic that everybody else that writes on this topic references.
Hey,
This very much links into the slight edge. It's this continuous improvement concept, it seems to me.
Exactly.
Exactly right, yeah.
I have a question, and maybe it's for each of you. I hate to put you on the spot, but Lawrence has done this for a long time, and Dan, you've done this for a little over a year. So maybe Dan, if you could start off and tell us where just an experience you've had in the last year that is a good example of what all you've been talking about here. Maybe a glitch you found, or you thought you were starting to get pretty good, and then something hit the fan or something. And then it would be good to hear from Lawrence, who's done this for a long time.
Yeah. So I mean, probably one of the biggest things for me was, I was using we have a script put together for LinkedIn, and I was using that script, and I was kind of just chasing my tail. One person after another wouldn't get back to me. I didn't feel like they were maybe looking at the information that I sent them. And so what I did to pivot was I came up with my own way of doing things in that regard. And some people that have been in this business for a long time, that have built a pretty good organization, may not want to, may look at it as a waste of time to have a 30-minute conversation with 8 or 10 people a day that maybe aren't qualified prospects because they didn't send them the initial information. But for me, building an initial organization, I changed my strategy to just reaching out to people, asking them if they consider new opportunities, and if you do, here's my Calendly link, schedule an appointment. I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity. And once I did that, I started getting a lot more responses. And with those responses, I feel like I'm able to better control the message, because they don't watch a 20-minute video or a 15-minute video and then go out and research it on the internet and say, this is a bunch of malarkey. I'm able to actually control that message and maybe put some thoughts in their head that if they do go research it on the internet, then they say, well, he said this, this isn't what I'm reading on on the internet. Maybe what's on the internet might not be true. There's a lot of stuff on the internet that's not true. So, I wanted to control that message. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've done to help grow my organization.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it sounds like you took instincts that you have from 20 years as a device rep in dealing with people. And no matter, we had some great scripts, you said, no, I'm going to pivot here because I'm not getting the results. So it's exactly what you guys are talking about. If you're not getting the results, you have to reevaluate. And certainly you want to try to follow the leadership, but you may have been even getting some advice from Lawrence about that to say, hey, you know what, try something different.
Yeah, I was talking to everybody that I knew. I was talking to other device reps that I know, and hey, how do you think this might be more effective? What, as a sales rep, medical device sales rep, what would put you over the edge? So I was reaching out to all kinds of people. I was talking to people on my team. I was talking to people that I used to work with, and and even having those conversations is how I introduced some other people to the business. So last week we talked about pivoting, and you don't want to pivot just because you're pivoting doesn't mean you're desperate, right? You're just trying to figure out a better way of doing things and what's going to help you hit your goals. And so it wasn't out of desperation, it was out of my want and desire to grow my organization and be successful in this business.
Right. But you did have to step a little bit out of your comfort zone because everyone was telling you, hey, use this script, it's the way to go. And you were new in this business. And you had to say, you know what, I'm going to try it a little different way because I'm just not getting the results.
Exactly.
So how about you, Lawrence?
Well, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I confessed about my own experience with going to see a physician and talking about getting the scanner placed. And there were certain things that happened there that I told you about. I was kind of like overconfident, and I think it's important that we go in with being a lion inside, but we've also knowing what we know, but also being letting the other person that we're talking to have their, we're in their space, so let them dominate their space, and we've got to be humble enough to be able just to listen. Because when this woman said, she said, well, I've been doing this for 20 years and I don't believe in the science. And I said, well, ma'am, you're wrong. I should have just said, ma'am, would you mind if I send you the information for you to analyze it and for you to tell me what you think, rather than me being arrogant like I was. And the other thing I think is important, that's a lesson that I learned, is, when we've done this for so long, as you've just said, and that's what triggered my thinking, and we become casual about, oh, just fill out this form and, just put your social on there and put your credit, give me your credit card. Hold on. A lot of people are really skeptic about giving their social or their credit card or anything like that. And of course we tell people to, do stuff online, but I'm just saying that it's important that we be very respectful of people's information and how we ask for it and how we approach it, because it sounds like we're brash or we just give me your card. No. So those are, two things that I would say are important that I've, and just one other thing. When Dan was talking now, I was thinking, I haven't been out to go and do any cold calls for, I don't know, for a long, long, long time. But yesterday, so we've got a new distributor who got a scanner and he's done all the theory and everything. So I said, all right, fine, let's go and do a practical thing. So yesterday we went out to do a practical cold call. And I think we're going to get a scanner from that just by luck. I mean, it was obviously the right time, but it's something that also, it's a comfort zone of being able to say, well, I mean, it was pouring with rain and I said, we're going to go. And it's just going that extra mile to try and to go and help somebody, to introduce them to how this business could be done. And I think I'm going to do this now, maybe once a week, because it's fun anyway, to
Yeah.
go and do some cold calls and go and, go and see whoever it is that I can get in to see. So keep on tweaking and sharpening the saw on that as well.
That's kind of interesting because I think we all know that when you are prospecting someone, time becomes very critical. If you let it go too long, they're going to have much diminished interest. If you call on them in 2 days instead of 2 weeks instead of 2 days. And I guess the same applies also when you bring on a new team member. As soon as they get that scanner, if you let them go 2 or 3 weeks without really jumping right in there with them, I know Stephen talks about shoulder up with them every day, of the first 30 or 60 days, And so even though you've done this all along, you still are working on that, aren't you, Lawrence?
Absolutely.
It's a constant evolving process, right? You should be constantly evolving in this business. You're doing in every facet of life. My personal goal is, I want to be evolving every day, be a better partner, to be a better person. Those are my personal goals. But you can carry those over to business as well. You need to constantly be striving to be better at what you're doing than you were the day before, and analyzing what you've done in the past and how you can improve upon that. And so, going back to the LinkedIn thing, one of the other strategies that I've changed is, I've been reaching out to a lot of people about, how can I help them? Is there any synergies that we have? Can we, maybe we could get on a call and talk about any synergies that we might have. And so that opens up a conversation that's not necessarily business related, but can lead in that way. And so yesterday I had a dentist who, we turned it into a conversation about nutrition and dentistry and how that plays into outcomes and things like that. And I just, haphazardly mentioned, a diagnostic tool that we have that measures oxidative stress. And, he got back to me with exclamation points. I'd like to know more about this device. Right. And so, it was a couple, maybe 3 or 4 back and forths about completely unrelated to the scanner, but the ultimate goal was to bring up the scanner in a way that it was organic. So next week, I think we're going to, keep this conversation rolling with some deliberate practices that you can put into practice, and then talk about deliberate practice, which is kind of the gold standard in having a more purposeful practice of these skills. So, Lawrence, do you have any final comments? We're running.
Can I
a little
just ask
late
one
here.
question? Just
Yeah,
one
sure.
question. Dan, when you said that at the beginning, your upline helped you with calls to doctors, what did that look like? Were they just telling you the verbiage to use, or were they on the phone with you? Because I kind of find it creepy having someone on the phone with a doctor at the first time, like all of a sudden you're on a phone call. Oh, I brought someone on already. Or did they help you with questions to ask?
Yeah, it was, it was a lot of, what questions to ask, how to probe for, what their pains are and what their philosophy is and things like that. A lot of that came from my 24 years in medical device sales, skills that I developed. And, I think I'm really good at reading people and being able to pick up on, what their interests are. And it's a little bit more difficult when you're doing it through a regular phone call, because you can't read all those other things like body language or their eyes, how are they paying attention to you and looking you in the eye, and are they fidgety, or when you ask them a question, does their body language change? So I've had to pivot from that to understanding how to maybe better understand, the inflection in their voice and things like that. So, a lot of this is about being able to read the person that you're talking to and, shift that conversation. You can't constantly just be spewing the facts to them, right? You need to listen, and you learn a lot more from listening than you do from talking. And so, I've always done that in sales. I've been pretty good at that, about listening to people and what their challenges are and, their pains and things like that, and then playing off of those.
Okay, great, thanks.
I mean, we'll stay on as long as you guys have questions. I mean, we're not, this isn't a time thing, you know, we're set up for 30 minutes, but we'll stay on as long as you guys like.
I just wanted to mention something that Dan said about planting the seed, and I think it's extremely relevant because in some ways, placing a scanner is just planting the seed, and unless we actually water that seed properly, so the person that just got the scanner that I went with yesterday, it was just the seed that's planted. Yeah, placed a scanner. Okay. So what? So where does it go from here? How do we make that seed produce a diamond? How do we make that seed grow in a way that is going to be motivational for that person, and exciting and fun and remunerative, you know? So Dan, for example, has many new distributors who've all got scanners. And so, you know, every week he's divided those into 2 different groups, and we've now got a training program for each of these groups where every question that they have gets answered, and it gets answered in a group. And some of them, you know, there may be 8 or 10 people in that particular group, and each one of those plants needs to have its own personalized fertilizer, because we're all different, and one person's doubts, maybe another person take it for granted. So the training and the growth of those people that have scanners, those are people that we've got to focus on. And that's something that I think Dan has also said several times, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And that is, you know, the best business that you've got is the business you've already got. It's the people that you've already signed up. We take those for granted. We shouldn't. I mean, I was looking over the end of the month and I'm seeing that I think there are like, I don't know, 30 some people just in my circle group with scanners who have not really gotten to that great level where they should be. And you know, I haven't spoken to some of these people for 3 or 4 months. Big mistake. So I'm just saying, you know, we've got to keep on. Part of our business is actually just doing public relations with the people we've got.
Yeah, you know, the salesperson mentality, you know, the difficult thing about bringing high-level medical device salespeople on is that they're salespeople, right? You tell them that the goal of this is to go out and place scanners. They're going to go out and place as many scanners as they can possibly place, right? They can go out and place 150 scanners, but that doesn't matter unless those scanners are useful, right? And so if you go out and you place 130 scanners, it's hard to nurture each one of those scanners because you've got way too many, right? You want to have 4 or 5 scanners placed with high-level reps of lots of relationships that you can then nurture and help those scanners be successful, right? To nurture them, to water them, to give them what they need to be successful, right? It's very difficult if you have more than that to nurture them properly. So you need to be hesitant about that when you're bringing on medical device reps because their goal is to go out and sell as many scanners as they can. So you need to kind of pull them back. And I tell these guys, look, this is completely different than anything you've ever done. If you've sold medical device for 25 years, it's completely different. But it's also similar. In medical device sales, you know, once I made a sale to a doc and got him to switch over to my implants, then the work began, right? I had to train the staff. I had to train the doctor. I had to train the sterile processing department on how to properly sterilize our instrument sets, you know, and all of that training that I did with the staff was all to make that surgery successful and to make the doctor ultimately happy with the outcome and the best outcome for the patient, right? And so, you know, all this work we do, you know, that we may not be getting paid for now is all being set up so that we get paid on it later, right? And so, you know, I look at, you know, this upfront work as laying the groundwork for future success. And that's how you have to look at it. You can't look at it that, you know, I'm spending all this time training these people when I could be out getting more scanners. That doesn't matter. If you can place 1,000 scanners, but if you're not nurturing the ones that you already have, the best, as Lawrence said, the best business that you have is the business that you already have. That's the easiest business that you're ever going to be able to get, right? You already have it. You've already done the work to get it. Now you just need to make it successful and nurture it to be successful. So that's what we're doing with our little micro teams, right? Where I'm having an hour call every week with them, talking to them about what they're doing, how we can help them, what they need answers on, you know, what objections have they heard and how to handle those objections, you know. And these guys are high level sales reps that have tons of relationships, and they still need to be taught how to do this particular business. They know how to sell, they just don't know how this business works. So we need to explain that to them and make it as clear as possible so that they know how this works.
This is a new career.
It's a pivot for them. A lot of these guys want to get out of medical device sales because it's not fun anymore. It's not lucrative. You know, on our call this week, the one team, they said, this is the most fun I've ever had. You know, I've been in medical device sales for 25 years, and it's fun actually going out to talking to physicians that aren't orthopedic surgeons, because they're a lot friendlier. You know, they're willing to talk with us. We're having back and forth conversation. You know, they'll give me an hour of their time. You know, it's impossible to get an hour of time of a surgeon because they're focused on surgery. They're focused on the more surgeries they do, the more money they make. And time is money. You know, they're trading time for a particular dollar amount. You know, I mention this all the time. It's interesting. My brother's an orthopedic surgeon, and he has no idea what he makes for any procedure that he does. And I'm like, if you're in this business to help patients, but you're also in this business to make money, why would you not know what you get paid for each particular procedure and then focus on the top 5 reimbursed procedures? You know?
Hey, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, because, you know, what you're saying right now relates to something you said a few weeks ago, and that is it has to do particularly with device reps or medical salespeople, and that is that they really long to be part of a team. And this whole process that you've set up truly, you know, nurtures that team effort while it coincides with training. But do you find much resistance from them? Like, hard to get them on the phone, they're too busy doing all this other stuff? Do you have frustrations like that with this or not?
Initially, but I tell them, look, this is what I want you guys to be doing. I want you to spend the first couple of weeks looking at all the material, right? And then after that, we're going to start doing a weekly team call. What time can you guys do it every week? Right? Because if we have it scheduled, they're going to show up, or at least a portion of the team's going to show up.
Yeah.
You know, they know what days they're not as busy. They know what days they're going to have time. So we schedule around their schedule, and that's what we need to do in the beginning. You know, we need to tailor what we're doing to their schedule, right? We can't say, look, I'm only available at 3:00 in the afternoon on Tuesdays, because they're not going to show up.
Right.
So Dan, on your comment with regard to surgeons, there's 2 different mindsets. There's a business mind. This is Jim Tiers. I'm an ophthalmologist and do eye surgery.
Okay.
There's a business mindset and a medical mindset. And when you talk to medical people, their focus is what's going to be the best thing for the patient. And then you also have a business mindset of what product makes me the most money. So when you're talking to medical people, they're typically going to be in the medical mindset. And if you get savvy people, they'll think about, oh, well, I make more money with that procedure than this procedure. And that so I'll be aware of it. But the driving goal with surgeons is what's going to do the best result. Just an
Exactly. And so, yeah, no, you're exactly right. And so you need to tailor your conversation to what their focus is, right? If they're patient focused, we're going to come at this thing from being able to measure something, prescribe a product, and then remeasure that, right? It's science-based evidence, right? And that's how you come at it from a patient standpoint with those medically focused docs. But if they're business minded and it's all about the money, then we're going to talk about the money, right? And there's a time and a place to have that conversation. You don't want to lead with that with a physician that's business minded, because then it comes off as maybe it's all about the money, which is ultimately what they're concerned about. But I think if we make it all about the money, then it comes off as it's not patient focused. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And thanks for your
Yeah.
comments. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and if you appeal to the medical side first, they are also doing a business and they know they get paid. So it's like, okay, now let's focus also on how you're getting paid. So
Yeah, because
Thank you very
ultimately they have a business, right? And they need to make money. And so, the conversation I have with them in regards to that is, this is something that you can do for your patients, but you can also make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you have the patient's best interests in mind, there's no reason, you should feel bad about making money. You have to keep the lights on. And if you can't keep the lights on and pay your staff, you're not going to be in business and you're not going to be able to help patients.
I think if I could just say something on that, there are many ways of talking about making money. And one of the ways of talking about making money is to highlight what may be missing in that person's life. So for example, the physician may be working many, many hours, and he has to do that because of insurance and reimbursements and electronic records and so on. But therefore, he may be sacrificing time with his family. So one of the ways to show the doctor or the person, that the surgeon who's great at what he's doing, is to say, if you have a little bit more money, you might be able to spend more time with your family. So it's not just sort of about the money, it's trying to equate it to something that will emotionally affect their thinking, and say, there's a wonderful, expo in Paris in February, and the person will say, I don't have the time to do that, and because I can't get away. And if you were making a little bit more money, you could actually do that. So, or if you had a little bit more time. So it's just a way of how we present. It's not say, it's about the money. It's about what you can do with the money that will help you, that will make you, it will help you emotionally, let's say, or your family.
Yeah, it's all in how we present it, and we present it differently based on reading the physician or the sales rep that we're talking about or talking to. The conversation I have with a lot of medical device sales reps is, you spend 2 hours a day on the car, you spend 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day at the hospital. How much of that time do you actually spend that's being useful, that's making you money? Because if you look, if you make $150,000 a year, but you're working 80 hours a week, you do the math, you're really not making that much per hour, and that's kind of what I did when I was in medical device sales. I mean, I was very successful, and I was compensated very, very well for my efforts. But if I looked at the amount of time that I was spending, it really didn't add up to what you could do doing other things. And so, that changed my mindset on that whole industry. And that industry's pivoted too, to Lawrence's point about, lifestyle and not having time. They used to have, national sales or training for physicians, product training. And, what they started to realize was these physicians didn't want to be out of the office because they might lose $5,000 or $10,000 a day. And so if they had to fly across the country to be trained, they were losing $5,000 or $10,000 in 2 days or more if they were surgeons. And so, they had to pivot and start doing regional trainings where a doc could come in on at the end of, he'd operate till 5, he'd drive an hour and a half, be trained for 2 hours and then drive home. So wasn't missing out on any income. So everybody's pivoting, trying to figure out what works best in their particular industry. And, we're doing that now in our business, and you constantly have to be looking at those variables and factors and what we can do better.
All right. Anybody, any other question? Anything else? Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks very much, Dan. Thanks everybody for being on the call. Don't forget on Monday to listen to Scott Bennett. Wednesday, Kent Nelson and Wendy Berman. And we've got the whole of October now to really knock it out the park and work towards our goal of December. So have a good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Good weekend. Blessings. Thanks for being on the call.
Blessings
Have a
to
great
you.
weekend, everybody. Thanks, everybody.